3 minutes before the orchestra was supposed to play my daughter's music, my husband pressed a microphone script into my hand and said, "Tell them Nora gave the symphony to Miles. If you say she wrote it, 24 kids could lose their scholarships." Through the stage curtain, I could see Nora in the balcony wearing a white paper wristband marked guest. She was 17. She had spent 14 months composing the piece the audience had come to hear. The program on every seat said River of Glass, composed by Miles Bennett, developed under the artistic guidance of David Crane. David was my husband. Miles was his 18-year-old violin fellow. Our daughter's name appeared nowhere. "You said the corrected programs were at the printer," I whispered. "The board would not approve them." Then we stopped the premiere. David caught my wrist before I reached the curtain. He did not squeeze hard, but the gesture was visible to Carmen Lee, the stage manager, who looked away and began checking a coil of cable that did not need checking. "You cannot punish the orchestra because Nora changed her mind," he said. "She did not change her mind. She sent Miles the files. She told him to use them." He pointed to the script. The first paragraph, "Welcome donors." The second thanked the Park Arts Foundation for funding 24 need-based seats. The third was written in my voice. "As Nora's mother, I want everyone to know that she chose to step away from composition for personal reasons and freely gave her early themes to Miles Bennett, who transformed them into the work you will hear tonight. Our family celebrates his achievement." Beneath that, in blue ink, David had added, "Smile toward Miles." Pause for applause. "You want me to call 14 months of work early themes? I want you to keep an ugly family disagreement from becoming a public accusation. You put the accusation in 600 programs." The lobby bell sounded. David lowered his voice. "The foundation renewal is $180,000. The premiere has to feature the current Crane Fellow. Challenge the credit, and Lillian Park can freeze it tonight." He would not say whether Lillian had made that threat. He claimed Nora signed a release and lost backstage access after disrupting rehearsal. The disruption was a panic attack. She heard the orchestra play the opening written at our kitchen table and froze until Carmen led her out. At home, David called that proof public credit would crush her. Nora still asked for her name back. Now she sat beside my sister Beth, staring at a program that erased her. Miles waited in the wing with his violin. He wore the black jacket David had bought for his fellowship portrait. When he saw the page in my hand, his bow dipped. "Mrs. Crane," he said, "did Nora approve the family statement?" David answered for me. "She approved the transfer." Miles looked at me, not him. "That's not what I asked." David told Carmen to bring up the house lights for the welcome. Carmen said, "Julia has not agreed to speak." Julia chairs the parent committee. The welcome is her role. That was the second role he had prepared for me. Not mother, not witness, but cheerful volunteer whose voice made the printed lie look settled. Amaya Ruiz, a scholarship cellist whose mother had been laid off, hurried over with one shoe untied. David touched her shoulder. "Your announcement still happens if everyone honors the program." He looked at me. Amaya understood her tuition had been placed between me and the truth. "I can go home," she said. "You did nothing," I told her. David answered, then read the welcome. Nora stood in the balcony. She did not wave. She held the program open with both hands, as if it were something heavy. I made the first bad choice of the night. I took the microphone, walked through the curtain, and decided I would correct everything before David could stop me. 600 faces turned toward the stage. Behind me, the orchestra lifted their instruments. A projection above them displayed Miles's portrait beside the words "A New American Voice." I welcomed the audience, thanked the student musicians, and looked directly at Nora. "Before this performance begins," I said, "the program needs one correction. My daughter, Nora Crane, wrote River of Glass." The room broke into a soft, confused noise. Nora stood so quickly her program fell over the rail. David came onto the stage, without being introduced. Miles followed him, still holding his violin. I expected Miles to defend the credit printed under his photograph. Instead, he reached for the second microphone and said, "She did not write all of it." The noise stopped. Nora's face changed from relief to alarm. Miles turned toward her. "If we're telling them, we tell them the part you left out too." David whispered, "Put that microphone down." Miles kept it. I had walked on stage to rescue my daughter's name. In one sentence, the boy I had publicly accused made my correction another lie. Lillian Park rose from the front row before anyone could applaud or leave. She was 70, small, silver-haired, and known for ending conversations with one raised finger.
She used it now.
No performance until I understand whose work my foundation was asked to present. David smiled the way he smiled when a donor complained about parking. This is a family misunderstanding that should never have reached the stage. Miles said, "It is also my work." Nora had reached the aisle, but Beth held her elbow, not restraining her, only keeping two rushing patrons from knocking her against the rail. I told Nora to stay where she was. That was my second mistake. I was still treating her as someone I could protect by controlling her movement. She pulled free of Beth and came down the balcony stairs. David asked Carmen to close the curtain. Carmen moved toward the control panel, then stopped when Lillian said, "Leave it open." The orchestra remained seated behind us, bows resting on black trousers, every scholarship student trapped inside our argument. Miles explained that Nora wrote the opening two movements and most of the third. 8 weeks earlier, when her panic became worse, she sent him the working files and asked him to build an ending she could not hear clearly anymore. He wrote the final 7 minutes, changed the brass transition, and rearranged a violin passage that had been physically impossible. Nora came through the house doors as he spoke. "I asked you to help me finish," she said. "You said if you couldn't come back, I should use it. Use the ending, not use my name. You wrote, 'If I can't come back, play it without me.'" David said, "There. That is the transfer." Nora laughed once, without humor. "That is not a transfer. That's what I texted during a panic attack." Miles's face went red. "You also told me not to put your name on anything until you could stand in the room." "Until I could stand in the room," she repeated. "I'm standing here." Asked Miles why he had accepted sole credit. He said he had not knowingly. David showed him a program proof 4 days earlier with a line music by Nora Crane and Miles Bennett. Miles approved the spelling of his name and the note about their shared youth workshop. Tonight's printed program was the first time he had seen himself listed alone. "I thought Nora was watching from the sound booth," he said. Nora held up her guest wristband. David told us to move backstage. The audience had begun filming, and the longer we remained visible, the less any of us could choose what the moment became. Lillian agreed to a 10-minute hold. Carmen led us into the rehearsal room, where the air smelled of valve oil and pepperoni pizza. She admitted David had delivered the solo credit projection at 6:10 and said the family requested it to protect Nora. Carmen loaded it without calling either of us. "I thought I was preventing a scene," she said. Through the wall came the uneasy sound of students tuning without instruction. David said the renewal packet called River of Glass the Crane Fellowship's culminating project. If it was not by fellow Miles, the board could be accused of using restricted resources for David's child. Nora had received rehearsal time, software, and musicians unavailable to other young composers. That part was true, and I had accepted it because David called the access harmless. The clean story I wanted gifted child creates masterpiece, ambitious father steals it now, had a real conflict built into its foundation. Then disclose the access, I said. Call it a workshop piece. Credit both writers. David replied that the foundation had already received a video in which Nora described herself as unable to complete the project and thanked Miles for carrying it forward. Nora went still. The video was recorded after her panic for what David called a college explanation. Nora, wearing my green robe, said she needed to step away and trusted him to decide what happened next. He cut her opening condition joint credit for any performance and sent the rest to the board. Miles whispered, "You showed me that clip." Nora asked to see the release carrying her signature. David opened his leather folder. The page was a standard youth participant media release I had signed at the start of the season. It allowed the orchestra to record Nora in rehearsals and promotional interviews. It did not transfer composition rights. It did not name River of Glass. My signature was there because I had signed committee forms too casually. David tapped it. Julia authorized Nora's contribution. A contribution is not a composition, Lillian said from the doorway. She held a copy of the renewal packet. David said the Foundation's council had accepted it. Lillian said she had not asked council to determine authorship because the packet included a letter from Julia and Nora supporting Miles's sole credit. She handed me the letter. It used phrases from my parent newsletters and ended with my typed name. Nora's name was typed below mine. There were no signatures. David called it a draft endorsement. Lillian pointed to the first page of the packet, where it was listed as Family Confirmation Final. I wanted to take the letter to the stage and read it aloud as proof of everything David had done. Nora took it from me. "If you show this," she said, "everyone will think Miles knew. Then he can say he didn't. And they'll believe the director's wife and daughter over the scholarship kid whose name is on the program." Miles looked down. His mother cleaned offices at the college after midnight. He had spent 6 years being introduced as proof that talent could outrun money. David had placed him where any correction could look like a wealthy family reclaiming work after the applause arrived. My first plan to restore Nora as sole composer in front of the audience was already false because Miles had written part of the music. My second plan to expose David's packet would make Miles the visible beneficiary of a fraud he had not designed. Then Lillian turned to the last page and showed us the line that changed the whole event. The renewal was not conditioned on River of Glass. The current grant had already funded the 24 seats through June. David's packet requested an additional national residency built around a filmed premiere, with David as paid artistic director and Miles as the single fellowship success story. My audience statement was listed as the promotional recording's opening. Lillian still wanted the concert rescued because 3 foundation trustees were in the hall, and she would not defend our family's privileged access. She was not offering us protection, only an honest deadline. David had used the students to keep me from interrupting an application for his next job. David did not deny the residency. He said it would bring the orchestra national attention and secure 3 years of future funding. Lillian said it was a proposal, not a promise, and no current student would lose a seat because the premiere paused. He looked at Amaya through the small window in the rehearsal room door. "Tell that to the families who hear the foundation chair question us in public." Lillian answered, "I will." David blocked the door. "If you walk out there and call this fraud, every parent will wonder whether Julia used her committee position to put Nora's work on our stage. They should wonder. We gave her access no other unaffiliated student had." Nora said, "You told me I was part of the workshop." "You were." Quietly. "You told me quiet meant protected. It meant possible." Miles placed his violin on a chair. "What did you tell the residency people I wrote?" David said the score. Miles asked whether he had included Nora's drafts in the application portfolio. David admitted the portfolio showed the evolution of the piece, but said early drafts were not ownership. Nora lunged for David's folder. He lifted it away. I grabbed his sleeve, and pages scattered from a struck music stand. Carmen opened the door to find us collecting them from the floor. David said I attacked him. I admitted grabbing him, while Nora admitted reaching first. Nobody supplied the clean version our side needed. Carmen said the audience had waited 18 minutes, and students were crying. David said the only way to contain the damage was to perform. He proposed an announcement naming Miles as composer and Nora as original creative contributor, followed by a private authorship review. Miles refused. David turned to Nora and offered joint credit on tonight's spoken introduction if she confirmed the family had approved his submission. "You want me to trade the word composer for a lie about Mom? I want you to acknowledge that people made decisions after you disappeared." Nora said, "I had a panic attack. I did not disappear." He told her composers met deadlines. She picked up his leather folder and held it against her chest. "Then cancel it." That surprised me. For 14 months, Nora had wanted nothing more than to hear the entire work in a hall. Canceling would cost her the moment even if every future credit was corrected. David knew it. "If you stop the performance," he said, "the orchestra will remember you as the director's daughter who used them until opening night." Nora's eyes moved toward the door. That was the trap under the trap. Performing under false credit erased her. Stopping the music made the students pay for her father's choices and confirmed every suspicion about her access. Miles said there was a third option. They could perform the first 2 movements, which he believed were entirely Nora's, then stop before his collaboration began. Nora said the first 2 used changes he had tested with the orchestra. He said testing was not composing. She said he had changed 12 measures. They argued over measures until Lillian asked what each could consent to tonight. Miles allowed one complete performance with both writers named and no promotional recording. Nora added withdrawal of the residency packet and living room video. Lillian could stop foundation use, not bind the orchestra board. Nora then looked at me. What do you want? Until that moment, I had treated my answer as obvious. I wanted her name restored. But I had already spoken over Miles, told Nora to stay in the balcony, and turned a disputed collaboration into my own public declaration. I want to correct the sentence I said. I told her. I don't know the complete credit. I know it isn't Miles alone, and it isn't you alone because I say so. David laughed softly. That will inspire confidence. It isn't advertising. Carmen said the assistant conductor, Simone Vega, could lead the piece if the board chair approved. David's face changed. The podium mattered more than he had admitted. The residency video was not simply proof of Miles's talent. It was supposed to show David conducting the success he claimed to have created. He opened the rehearsal room door and walked onto the stage before any of us agreed. The tuning stopped. David took the center microphone and told the audience there had been an emotional disagreement about a family workshop that his daughter had abandoned. He said the orchestra would now honor the students who had prepared despite an attempt to turn their concert into a private ownership dispute. He invited me to join him and confirmed that the performance should continue. 600 people looked toward the wing. He had rebuilt the original demand in public. Stand beside him and validate his words, or remain hidden and let him define my refusal. Nora started forward. I stopped her, then caught myself. Your choice, I said. She went. Miles walked beside her. I followed last. Phones rose across the hall. David held the microphone toward me. I did not take it. I stepped to the second microphone and said, my earlier statement that Nora wrote every part was not accurate. Nora Crane and Miles Bennett both wrote music you are scheduled to hear. Neither approved sole credit to Miles, and our family did not submit the endorsement described in the grant packet. David reached for the sound control. Carmen moved between him and the panel. I loaded one change without asking the people named on it, she said. Not another. He told the audience current scholarships depended on a successful performance and asked Lillian to confirm it. Lillian stood in the aisle and said, current scholarships are funded. The proposed residency is paused. The audience split. One parent condemned family politics, another questioned Nora's free access, and someone called Miles a thief. Nora took the microphone from its stand. Don't call him that, she said. He wrote the ending. He was shown a video that made him think I left. I did not give Dad permission to erase me, and I did get access other writers didn't get. Both are true. David told her to stop confessing to accusations nobody had made. She looked at him. You made them in advance, so you be the only person who could save me from them. He ordered the orchestra to begin. Simone remained beside the podium instead of yielding it. The concertmaster, a 16-year-old named Grace, lowered her bow and asked, whose names do we play under? It was the first question from the people whose labor David kept invoking. Nora looked at Miles. Miles looked at Nora. He said, ours for tonight. No residency video. Nora nodded. Lillian said corrected joint credit would not violate the current grant. The board chair, who had been speaking into a phone near the exit, came to the stage and asked David to step away from the podium until the packet and credit changes were reviewed. He refused. This orchestra does not vote on its conductor 5 minutes before a premiere. Simone said, no. But musicians decide whether to raise their instruments. Behind her, Grace kept her bow down. Amaya did the same. Then another student. Not all of them. 2 parents shouted for the concert to proceed. A percussionist left the stage in tears. The room was divided and ugly and real. David looked at me as though I could still restore his authority with one sentence. Tell them I built this, he said. I answered. You built an orchestra. That doesn't make every voice inside it yours. He stepped off the podium. Simone climbed onto it. Carmen replaced the projection with a plain black slide. River of Glass. Nora Crane and Miles Bennett won live performance. The first note began before David reached the aisle. He stopped beside our daughter's empty guest seat and listened to music he could no longer introduce as proof of himself. The performance was not triumphant. In the second movement, a horn entered early. Miles missed the top of a violin phrase he had played perfectly all week. Nora stood beside the curtain with both fists pressed against her mouth, unable to watch and unable to leave. I stayed 3 feet away, because she had not asked me to touch her. When the final 7 minutes began, the part Miles had written from Nora's unfinished structure, she lowered her hands. "He made it less afraid," she whispered. The line hurt, because it was generous and because it was true. David had tried to turn authorship into a single chair, but the music itself carried more than one person's decisions. At the final chord, part of the audience stood. Part remained seated. There was applause, angry conversation, and no speech from the stage. Simone asked Nora and Miles whether they wanted to bow. Miles said no. Nora said, "Only with the orchestra." They walked out with the student musicians and stood in the back row, not at the microphones. David watched from the side aisle. He did not come backstage afterward. He sent the board a message saying he had been publicly undermined by his family and denied basic process. He also sent Nora a separate text. "I protected the only version of your talent the world was willing to fund." She showed it to me, then deleted her reply before sending it. "I was going to tell him he never knew my talent," she said. "That isn't true either." David had taught her how to hear when a melody was hiding inside too much sound. He had also taught her that access could be withdrawn the moment gratitude stopped looking like obedience. Both facts remained. In the lobby, Lillian guaranteed current scholarships but not the next season. Miles's mother arrived in her cleaning uniform, saw her son's face on the program, and found posts calling him a thief.
"She turned on me."
"You said he stole it in front of cameras." "I was wrong to say it that way. Wrong travels faster than corrections." "I did not defend myself." Miles told her David had shown him an edited video. She asked why he had not called Nora directly. He said David told him contact would worsen her health. Nora said she had blocked Miles for 2 weeks after he sent 3 messages asking about the ending. She had assumed he was helping David pressure her back to work. Neither teenager had done the one simple thing adults always recommend after adults have made it feel dangerous. Miles's mother asked Nora whether her son wrote the final movement. Nora said yes. She asked Miles whether Nora wrote the opening. He said yes.
"Then start there," she said.
She took him home without forgiving any of us. David returned after the lobby emptied. The stage crew was stacking chairs, and each metal scrape echoed through the hall. He asked me to sign a statement saying I had acted without full information and regretted disrupting the premiere. I told him I would sign a statement saying I had inaccurately called Nora the sole writer and had corrected myself. He wanted the word unauthorized. "You were unauthorized," he said. So, was the letter carrying my name? He offered to withdraw the residency packet if Nora publicly confirmed he had reasonably interpreted her message as permission. Nora answered from behind me, "You keep offering me pieces of my own no." David said the board would suspend him, maybe dismiss him, and the orchestra could lose donors after June. "Is that what you want attached to your first premiere?" Nora looked toward the stage.
"No."
"It's what you attached to it." She did not ask for him to be fired. She asked him to tell the board exactly who edited her video, who changed the program proof, and who submitted the family letter. He said counsel would advise him. She said, "Then we're done tonight." It was the first boundary of the evening that did not require a microphone. A 5-week review confirmed that David changed the joint credit proof, edited Nora's video, submitted the false family endorsement, and gave her privileged access without a written policy. He resigned before the board voted, kept teaching privately, and saw the residency application withdrawn. The orchestra kept current scholarships, but lost one prospective donor. Simone became interim conductor. It was neither ruin nor vindication. My marriage did not survive, but its ending was not the last scene of the story. I resigned from the parent committee because my unchecked signatures and instinct to speak for Nora had helped create the authority David borrowed. I did not resign as her mother. 6 months later, a university chamber ensemble asked Nora and Miles to present a revised River of Glass. They agreed only after writing their own credit note. Nora was listed as composer of Movements 1 and 2 and co-composer of Movement 3. Miles was listed as composer of Movement 4, arranger and co-composer of Movement 3. Beneath the names appeared one sentence. Credits approved by both writers. Performance permission applies tonight only. I sat in the 4th row. David was not there. Before the music began, The host handed me a microphone because someone had noted that I had chaired the original orchestra committee. "Would you like to introduce your daughter?" she asked. For 1 second, I wanted the clean version at last. My chance to say Nora's name first, praise what she survived, and repair the premiere with better words. Nora looked at me from the stage. Miles stood beside her. I handed the microphone back. They wrote the introduction. Nora read the first half. Miles read the second. Neither thanked me. Neither condemned David. They explained which movements belonged to whom and where their work overlapped. Then Nora added a sentence that was not in the printed note. Last time this piece was played, adults kept asking one voice to prove who owned the others. Tonight, the names are here because the people under them agreed. She looked toward me, not for permission, only to see whether I had heard.
I had.
When the conductor raised her hands, Nora and Miles moved away from the microphone and took separate seats at the edge of the stage. The program rested open on my lap. 2 names appeared above the title, neither smaller, neither borrowed, and no family statement beneath them.